Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Soul-u-tions podcast. This is the last Soul-u-tions podcast episode that's going to drop in the year 2025. That is just super crazy for me to think about. And especially as I'm recording this, the first part of November. But golly, thank you so much for listening to the podcast over this past year. I really hope that it has, that it's been a meaningful bi-weekly date between me and you, and that it has impacted your life in a positive and powerful and loving way. So today's episode, I want to share something with you that I heard just recently that really hit me. But I also have an invitation for you that I want to share with you. So listen to the introduction and I'll meet you on the other side.
Einstein said, "We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them." Most everyone in the world is solving their problems the wrong way. Our problems come from our thinking, and we can solve them with our thinking. So whether you're at your lowest, just trying to grow, or whether you are trying to sustain growth over your lifetime, join us as we push the boundaries of our current thinking and redefine how we find Soul-u-tions.
The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibilities.
Okay, so the last podcast of 2025, that's just really remarkable that we've been together for another year, sharing the best insights that I can think of to share with you that would be meaningful for you and your life. And I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for listening. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for, leaving nice, encouraging reviews. And thank you especially for your emails to me and your messages to me on social media where you say this really hit home for me. And I've shared this podcast with friends who are going through something because it helped me to hear it. And I think it will help them. All of that is just why I do this podcast. But I also want to encourage you and invite you to take our relationship, take your learning a step further in 2026. I would love for you to join us in the Soul-u-tions Labs. The doors are going to be opening just as soon as this podcast drops, and it's just going to be open for a small window of time at the beginning, the first week of January. But truly, one thing, you have been primed from listening to these podcasts. And the part that you're probably wondering, I hear Tara talk and I, go to implement these things in my life. Like, how could being in the Soul-u-tions Labs be any different? Like, what would be better about that? And what I want to share with you is something that I share with all my clients. Like, it's one thing to read something and know something intellectually. It's an entirely different thing to really absorb the teaching and the lesson and to make that a part of who you are. That requires laying down new neural pathways in your brains. And we know from imaging of people's brains as they're learning new things, we know that it takes 140 to 160 days if you are like regimented, disciplined person at applying the concept. It takes that long for the concept to really sink in to such an extent that it creates a neural pathway for you to to really put it into practice without having to think about it over and over. And that's right at about a 6-month mark. So if you're in the Soul-u-tions Labs, there's something, I don't know why it is this way, but there's something magical about paying for something, like putting skin in the game. It is one thing to listen to the podcast. And when it's for free, truly, it's like, oh, this is free. I'm going to do it while I'm multitasking over here, doing my laundry, driving carpool, like just have it on in the background. But when you pay for something, and this is what happens for me when I pay for coaching, that I'm like saying, okay, but I'm going to put some skin in the game here. I am going to commit to getting X amount of dollars of value out of that thing that I'm purchasing. So for instance, I have on this beautiful red jacket right now that I got from one of my favorite stores in town, Capsule. And I paid a fair amount of money for this jacket. So one thing I want to do is I want to make sure I get my money's worth out of this jacket for this season. I want to think about ways that I can wear it. I want to think about events that I can wear it to, things that are different. So already I have worn this jacket to a rock concert in New York City. And today, if you could see the behind the scenes me, I have on leggings and a black t-shirt, and I'm like racing out the door to come record the podcast. I'm like, what could I do to like elevate this so that the people who see me from the waist up don't know that I have running leggings on the bottom? And I was like, oh, that fabulous new jacket. And I put it on and I was just so excited to wear it. So if it had just been a hand-me-down or something that I had not specifically chosen to buy for myself, I wouldn't be thinking about ways to get my money's worth from it. Similarly, with being a podcast listener and going from podcast listener to member of the Soul-u-tions Labs, it's an investment. It's a $120 a month investment, or if you buy an annual membership, it's a $1,200 investment. You do get you just get a little taken off for going ahead and committing to yourself in advance of this. And then instead of just like waiting for the podcast to drop, you do what our members do who have looked at their calendar. They know when the classes are. They are repeatable classes that happen at the same time every week, and they just block that time out on their calendar. And I'm not just talking about stay-at-home moms. I'm talking about stay-at-home moms who also run a business, right? They're moms at home and they're business owners. I'm talking about CEOs who do this. I'm talking about people who really have to think intentionally about what do I want to use my time for? Like, how do I want to invest in my happiness and my success and in the quality of my relationships? Like, what are the things that I can do to really give me time back for me and the space, and to put me in front of an objective, trained listener, mediator, lawyer, life coach, experienced person who has seen a lot of the challenges that life has to bring her, who needed help herself, and who went out there, got it, figured it out, and now has coached and taught hundreds and hundreds of women who end up staying and who end up developing amazing friendships with one another, which is so interesting when you think about this as an online community, because we meet online. And the reason we meet online is because there aren't just people from my local town of Augusta who are members. There are women all over. There are women in New York. There are women in New Jersey. There are women in 3 different cities in North Carolina. There's a woman in D.C. and Minnesota. Like women all over the place who really have said, like, this has been such a meaningful thing for me in my life that I am going to show up every week. And then there are other women who their schedules don't allow them to show up weekly, but for years, they still put on their schedule their time to listen to the recording. And we have we have an entire portal, and we have like Facebook that isn't on Facebook, a community aspect where you can post things in between classes. And they talk back and forth and they share things together about the best practices. So I want you to know that if you've gotten something out of this podcast, I really guarantee that you will get 10x out of joining the Soul-u-tions Labs. Really think about that. And one reason I can say that is because you'll have access to me and my other coaches, like Elizabeth Elliott, who's also trained and both in my Soul-u-tions Labs philosophy and coaching framework, as well as in the Life Coach School framework, as well as being part of like the Episcopal Church's training for young people. There's just so much there. And when we are showing up, we are going to interact with you and we're going to ask you the questions that we're trained to ask that you are really relying on yourself to come up with. And, you know, it's so nice to be able to relax and not have to kind of have yourself playing dual roles at the same time. You can just relax and say, hey, this is what's going on in my life. And then allow us to lead you in the questions and allow us to do the heavy work of like hearing the insights that we hear in your tone of voice and in your stories, and hearing the opportunities that we know have presented themselves for other clients and possibly could present themselves for you. And so truly, like, we are committed to you getting 10x out of being a member of the Soul-u-tions Labs. And there's something pretty special when someone believes in you that much and believes in what's possible for you, who is holding that space for you. And you know, what is holding the space? It's kind of a term of art. We would call that in the practice of law a term of art, like it means something in the coaching profession. But what that means is it's just someone who, again, is objective. I don't have like any type of bias between your relationship with your mother or your relationship with your child or your partner or your friend. I'm not biased in that. So I can listen from an unbiased perspective, and I can see things that you may not be seeing and point those out to you. And I also, though, can validate your feelings about what's going on. And that's just something I think we all need right now in the world, because everybody's attention spans have shrunk because of our beautiful technology that's available. But also, it seems like the ability for people to truly and deeply listen is a lost art. And so when you're a member of the Soul-u-tions Labs, you're putting yourself back into a situation where people are deeply listening to you. Now, speaking of something that's deeply listening, there's this interesting research that I just read about this past week that came out of Harvard Medical School. And I'm betting you haven't heard it. I hadn't heard about this particular research study before, although I have been studying anecdotal type of evidence of this for the past 15 to 20 years, especially in the world of healing and pediatric cancer, which I come at from my son. But I want to share this with you because if you are a person who speaks to yourself in terms that are highly critical, this could be something that you could use your annual membership in the Soul-Shine Labs to change in 2026. And remember, I said it takes about 140 to 160 days to change something like this. So unless you really are a super disciplined person who knows that you're going to sit down and do this for yourself for 6 months, like being a member of the Soul-Shine Labs solves that problem for you because you are going to have 2 classes a week that allow you to show up and build the neural pathways, especially when you are able to share, like, this is my goal for the year. I want to change the way that I speak to myself. I want to change this highly critical voice in my head. And I will tell you before I jump into this research, I also know that from a parenting standpoint, it's like your child's childhood is impacted by how you show up as an adult in their childhood. So if you're talking to yourself in a highly critical voice and you have kids, guess what? They are absorbing that voice and they are going to adapt that voice for themselves and use it for themselves. And this is where I lean in as a consumer of coaching and as a woman alive today, like, the way I show up as a mother is so meaningful for me. And the way I show up as a wife and a daughter and a friend are also highly meaningful for me. And so if I know that the critical voice I use with myself, like if I just said something like, I'm so stupid, how could I have left the keys? Or like what happened to me at a family wedding when I had organized all the cummerbunds and the ties and the shoes and the studs for 3 young men who are either in college or living independently to be able to have at this wedding. And when they arrived, they left all of that at home. If I hadn't done this work, can I tell you, I would have transferred that highly critical voice that I speak to myself with, and I would have jumped all over them. But because of this work that we do in the Soul-Shine Labs, I can take a beat prior to being responsive to a situation, right? I have the ability to say, oh my gosh, all right, this isn't what we planned, and this is now an issue and a problem, and how are you going to solve that problem? How can I help you solve the problem? But I don't use that critical voice like nearly as much as I used to. And think about this. Even if you reduce that critical voice in your head by 50% over the course of the next 12 months of being a member of the Soul-Shine Labs, like, how would your life be different? Can you imagine, like, you wouldn't have that critical voice constantly in your head, second guessing, berating, calling you stupid. Like, just imagine there was silence in the space of how stupid I could be. I lost my keys. I don't know where I put them. Or your grown children who you have, the amount of time you're together with them is so precious because they're not living in your house anymore. And do you want their takeaway of being with you to be how you harped on them about all the things that they didn't do right, in your opinion? I mean, if we could just decrease that, just think about how impactful that would be in your life. So here's this research that just came out of Harvard Medical School, psychoneuroimmunology program. I always kind of want to reverse those and go neuropsycho, but it's psychoneuroimmunology. They ran an experiment where volunteers spoke to themselves, literally saying things like, "You're healing, you did well today." And this is what they found after 2 weeks. They did actual brain scans and body scans, and they found that there was a measurable drop in inflammation markers in their bodies and in their brains. What the scientists were testing, interestingly enough, were feedback loops. And so when words, our spoken words that we say, reduce fear, our cortisol levels fall, our blood flow improves, and our immune cells repair faster. They said your body listens to tone before it listens to words and data. And what do we mean by tone? That critical kind of tone that comes behind the words. Now, I'm telling you here that there's a measurable reduction in inflammation markers when you learn to start speaking kindly to yourself after 2 weeks. But then I'm also telling you that it takes about 6 months to make this new way of speech a habit. So instead of just doing this for 2 weeks and then falling off the wagon and then having to kind of come back, figure out a time to come back to this new habit, and say you're able to keep it for 2 weeks or 3 weeks again, and you get a little spike in the benefit and then you fall off again. I think about this like when I was younger and prior to forming the Soul-Shine Labs. And when I mean younger, I mean 40 because I'm 58. I loved New Year's so much because I loved the resolution process. I loved the feel of a new beginning. But as a Catholic, by the time Ash Wednesday rolled around, I always looked forward to Ash Wednesday, which is the beginning of Lent. So you can go from Easter and go 40 days backwards. So it's usually sometime in February or early March. So from New Year's, I could usually like sustain my enthusiasm for my resolutions until about, this is also interesting, what they call National Quitters Day. And I've done a podcast last year actually on National Quitters Day, which is the second Friday of January. 80% of the population will like have a drop off in their level of commitment and enthusiasm to their New Year's resolutions by the second Friday of January. And then, I could say that really happened. Like I really experienced that phenomenon. And I was so excited when Ash Wednesday would come around because I'm like, okay, here's another time for a renewed sense of commitment. And the thing about Lent, and was so wonderful for me, was that I also was with a community, my faith community, my church community, who also recognized these weeks leading up to Easter. And so there was some accountability. People would say, well, what did you give up for Lent? Or what are you doing for Lent? Like, what is your commitment to growing in your own personal faith commitment during this time? And just by having that additional sense of accountability during Lent, I would stick with it. I would stick with that commitment all the way till Easter. And, when you're little, it's like, I'm not going to eat candy or chocolate. And maybe there was a phase, when I'm like, maybe I won't have potato chips or French fries, or maybe I'll even give up alcohol. But you also knew that as soon as Easter came about in late March or April, that you were going to go back to doing those same old things again. And think about it again. It's just the science. It was less than 140 to 160 days, Lent is. It's less, it's 40 days. And so you haven't spent enough time doing this new thing for it to really the root system, the neural pathways build themselves up. So of course you just kind of fall off the wagon, even though you had that amount of time. And then you kind of just go along throughout the year. And I'll say there's always another wave of momentum at back to school time. Back to school, and everybody likes diving back into new routines and habits and that push to the end of the year. And so without the Soul-u-tions Labs, this is probably how your year is going to go. You're going to get that first set of enthusiasm about the thing that you want to change. And if this thing is changing the way you speak to yourself and trying to reduce that self-critical thinking and increase this kinder thinking to yourself, probably the second Friday of January, you're going to kind of start to fall off the wagon. And then maybe you'll pick that up again during the time of Lent or some other time if you have another faith tradition in your life. And then, you'll fall off again. And then maybe back to school time, you'll say, okay, I'm really going to just dig deep. But what if you could be relieved of that type of cyclical up and down and never being able to put 140 to 160 days together to really commit to changing your speech? And in the Soul-u-tions Labs, that's what we do for you. We just provide you with the infrastructure, the sense of community, and the accountability to really make the change. And then on the flip side, what happens? Once you've built those neural pathways, once you become a person who has learned to reduce her critical speech with herself, you are that person for the rest of your life. So that investment that you made in yourself by putting some skin in the game at $120 a month or $1,200 for the year will pay off and compound for the rest of your life. So say you're 40 years old. What you really are paying for is, say you have 50 plus years of your life ahead of you. Can you imagine what you really leave? And this is how I can say it's a 10x of what you get from just listening to the podcast of a return on the impact. Can you imagine living for the rest of your life with a 50% reduction in your critical speech with yourself? And from this test and this study from Harvard Medical School, can you imagine entering the second half of your life with giving your body this gift of reducing inflammation markers, cortisol falls, blood flow improves, and immune cells repair faster at the time in your life when that begins to slow down anyway? It's such a great gift to give to yourself, something like this. And that's just one example of it. But I do know when you begin to speak kinder to yourself, you also speak kinder. You show up as a person who is kinder to herself in her parenting role and in her marriage. If you have more patience with yourself, you automatically have more patience with every other person that you're in relationship with. And so again, this begins to build and compound over your life. Now, what I hear from women most of the time, and I think this is such an interesting thing because I heard this exact same phrase in another podcast with doctors, female doctors who are part of this, what we call the menopause. And if you're a listener to the podcast, you know, we really do cover all the things of physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health in the podcast. Well, we cover all of those areas in the Soul-Shine Labs as well. We're just going deeper in it. But an orthopedic surgeon who talks about the muscular skeletal impact of perimenopause and menopause says that when women show up in her waiting room and in her practice and in her exam room, like complaining about, I do not know where all this pain is going on in my body. I don't know about this shoulder that's frozen. Why can't I sleep? My hips hurt so much. And she explains to him what's going on. She says, women do what women do. They try to wait it out. They try to wait out painful situations. So by the time a woman shows up in her exam room, they've been trying to wait the pain out for years. Years. This is not unusual. Think about yourself. Like, oh, I have this chronic foot pain. I was thinking about it this weekend at the wedding I was in. I can't wear all the my favorite high heels anymore. I couldn't wear them at this wedding because my left metatarsal toe won't bend. And I have pain in that joint every day for the last almost year. And it just occurred to me when I heard this podcast, I'm like, oh my gosh, Tara, you're doing it. And you know the impact that going to the doctor and what early intervention can do on things like this. And I haven't had a doctor look at it because I'm just like, oh, there's nothing they can do. I might as well wait it out. And there's a great reason why you think this is because you have been told this over and over. And as women, we are told like, oh, just wait it out. That's going to resolve itself. It may take a few years, or there isn't anything we can do about that for you. And what I want you to know is this. That is, again, speech we have internalized because we have picked it up and we've heard it. And that is the kind of speech that we want to change, and we are changing every week in the Soul-Shine Labs. We are changing women. We are changing women from being people who wait and from people who accept being told there's nothing that can be done about that to women who are so curious and who become fabulous advocates for themselves about, well, I wonder what is going on here. And if you can't help me, I wonder who can help me. Women who, when they hear their doctors say there's nothing we can do, are now beginning to understand that that just means there's nothing that doctor can do. And they're finding other doctors who specialize in women in midlife. And similarly, by joining the Soul-Shine Labs, you are going to be joining a coaching membership that specializes in all of the issues that you face as a midlife woman. And you are never going to hear the words, there's nothing you can do to feel better about this situation. You've just received a terrible diagnosis. You're never going to hear, there's nothing you can do about it. You've just had a big fight with your partner, and you're never going to hear, there's nothing you can do about it. Your parents are aging, and you're finding yourself in this impossible position of having to learn how to parent them or be a respectful child for them, but set boundaries for your own life. You're never going to hear there's nothing. Oh, I'm just so sorry to hear that. You're just in the sandwich generation. You know, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to let time take its course. You're never going to hear those words because there is always something you can do about it. Even if it's something as seemingly small and insignificant about learning how to be kinder to yourself as you navigate those situations. And that is something that can always be done, as well as learning how to see things through different eyes, learning how to trust the process that we're going to give you. So I really want you to think about this year, letting 2026 be the year that you decide to join us in the Soul-Shine Labs. And for those of you who join, like from the day that this drops to the 1st of January, like if you are an early decider and you decide to join, we have an annual retreat in the Soul-Shine Labs that is like, I mean, truly, my friends, my colleagues in coaching, they charge $5,000 for these retreats. I just charge for your expenses. It's usually less than $500 to attend. It's the end of January. It's January the 28th, 29th, and 30th. And you usually have to be in a full year before you're invited. But if you decide after listening to this podcast, like this is really your year, then you will receive an invitation to that retreat, which, I mean, that's worth more, as I said, than the entire year's membership for the Soul-Shine Lab. So even if the only thing you wanted to do was to go to a retreat this year, you should join us for a year and show up for that. Because like I said, my colleagues charge a minimum of $5,000 for events like that. Well, I'm out of time, and I want to just thank you again for being with me for this past year. I look forward to coming and sharing this Soul-u-tions podcast time with you through 2026. I can promise you that that I have a lot just in store for you that's going to be exciting. And so if this isn't the time for you to join the Soul-Shine Labs, I want you to know I'm still here and I've still got you, and I'm still looking forward to spending the time with you. But if it is the right time, I want you to let this be that little sign that you're looking for, the little nudge to nudge you over the edge. All right. Until 2026, my friends, have a great, great New Year's celebration.
'Cause I ain't done living the life I'm meant to lead. And I ain't done loving the ones who cared for me. The hope and the strength and the love and the smiles and the laughter of friends and family. Add it up, you'll find no limit to the possibility.